Live from the capital city, a special political edition of Carolina News, the path to the presidency. From the Palmetto State's presidential primaries to the general election in the fall, it's all here, now, on Carolina News.
Good morning and welcome to this special political edition of Carolina News. I'm Kevin Smarr.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Deonica Thomas. The path to the presidency made an early stop in South Carolina.
And a big win for the two parties' frontrunners gave their campaigns momentum as they battled for the party's nomination.
In a crowded Republican field, GOP candidates spent the week campaigning trying to win over the Palmetto State. Donald Trump, Ted Cruz, Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, John Kasich, and Jeb Bush all made appearances in this great state. Donald Trump won big with 32% of the vote, receiving all 50 of the state's delegates. Rubio and Cruz were virtually tied with 22%, but Rubio made the edge with 0.2% more. A poor showing in South Carolina resulted in Bush suspending his campaign indefinitely. Kasich and Carson both received 7% of the vote. However, Kasich still continues to pursue the Republican nomination.
On the other hand, South Carolina proved to be a favorable state for Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton. The former Secretary of State clinched the primary with 73% of the vote and received 39 delegates. Although Bernie Sanders had a weak turnout, the Vermont senator still captured 14 delegates and 26% of the vote. Our Carolina News team has been covering the 2016 race to the White House since the Iowa caucuses.
Let's send it over to Malik Rankin, who has all our team coverage on the demographics that make up this election season.
Thanks, guys. In this demographic segment of the show, we'll be looking at race, gender, age, and religion and the effect they've had on the candidate's path to the presidency. Our team coverage begins with race. In the South Carolina primary, the Democratic Party received the majority of its votes from minorities, 61% of that being the black vote. In the Republican Party, only 4% of the vote was made by minorities.
The Republican frontrunner's poll numbers seem to be unaffected by his racial rhetoric.
They're bringing drugs, they're bringing crime, they're rapists, and some, I assume, are good people.
Shik Sabaga is a political science professor at Midlands Tech. He says Trump reaches his supporters by playing on their fears.
It's not so much how conservative you are, but how well are you reaching out to people's fears about their economy and the direction that the country is going. Some of the rhetoric is very unfortunate, and I'm sure not the direction that the country probably would want to go in.
The direction of the country is reduced to political slogans. Trump says to make America great again, and Clinton wants to make America whole again.
Nothing divides America like war and peace, black and white, rich and poor, and it's unfortunate that one of the candidates in a major party is appealing to race in a way that maybe divides Americans.
Democratic candidate Hillary Clinton campaigned hard for the black vote in South Carolina, setting a pattern for other southern states on Super Tuesday.
To us. Nobody listened to us. Nobody said Black Lives Matter. Until this brave and powerful woman stood up for us.
As minority voters work to Clinton's advantage, the absence of them doesn't seem to slow Trump's momentum.
As the primaries move out west, it's going to be very interesting to see the degree to which Latino voters turn towards Hillary Clinton and to what degree do they look to Senator Cruz or Senator Rubio. For both the Republican and Democratic parties.
And if Trump is nominated, minority voters will have to decide how to assess his very controversial statements before the general election.
When I spoke with Professor Shik Sabaga, he said the general election can really boil down to that minority vote. And continuing in our team coverage of demographics and politics, similar to race, gender influences the polls. Dating back to 1980, the percentage of female adults voting has exceeded male adults voting. The largest gap between voter turnout with males and females can be seen in most recent years. Although women are being represented in the polls, they're still subject to gender biases. Our Alexa Angeles tells us why that is.
I will work as hard as I can every single day. I will get up and go to work for you and fight for you.
Hillary Clinton's fight to the White House is possible because of the 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920, that allows women to vote, and even run for president.
A change in politics has occurred over time, but gender stereotypes for female leaders, such as Clinton, still persist and continue to affect voter behavior.
When you don't have a lot of information about policy, you actually need to have a female candidate that is so obviously more qualified than the male candidate that she can overcome that hurdle. And that's not easy to do.
Professor Moe's findings can pick up on brain biases that show people have difficulty picturing females in a leadership position, even when both candidates, male and female, are equally qualified. Political strategist Amanda Loveday says the adjustment from a male to a female is difficult for voters.
If you go back to 2008, most people would have told you we would have never elected the first African-American president, and everyone thought that we were ready for a woman. And I think that a gender jump from male to female, rather than a race jump, I think is much harder for society.
But why is that? A study by Pew Research Center reports that women in public office are better at working out compromises, keeping government honest, and overwhelmingly better at dealing with social issues. However, the majority of Americans believe men are more suited to deal with crime, public safety, national security, and defense. But Professor Moe says that people are malleable.
They can change, people can learn, but that's not going to happen if people don't actually run, right? If women don't put themselves out there, then there is not going to be an example of what a woman leader can look like.
And Clinton continues to be that example. The Secretary of State clinched the women's vote in South Carolina Democratic primary with 79% compared to Bernie Sanders' 21%.
We have to make strong the broken places.
Alexa Angeles, Carolina News.
In 2012, females made up 53% of the overall voters in the U.S., making it even more important for all presidential candidates to campaign for the female vote. And continuing with our team coverage, we move into the age demographic. This year, the millennial voters are expected to have a significant impact in the polls. In the South Carolina Democratic primary, Bernie Sanders was the frontrunner among young voters. On the Republican side, Ted Cruz was in the lead, claiming 28% of the young vote. Trump and Rubio were not far behind. The strategies and tactics used over the years has evolved, and our Deonica Thomas takes a closer look at how effective those methods impact the young voters.
With the young voter expected to make up the same proportion as the baby boomers for the first time in this upcoming presidential race, candidates have taken different routes in order to grab the young voters' needed attention. From speaking out against college tuition, campaign ads,
I'm voting for the first time,
and social media. Student voters have recognized these strategies used by the candidates to sway their vote.
I think that trying to make yourself seem like more of a pop culture icon rather than a legitimate candidate does help in some ways. However, I still think that it's a very blatantly bogus platform.
They'll release videos that are kind of like BuzzFeed style, so they'll be like listicles or like really cool designs and fun colors and stuff going on in their videos that catches the attention of younger voters. And once it catches their attention, then they're going to listen to the policies that the candidates stand for and how that they can represent America. And I think that that's a really good tactic.
Unfortunately, young people want to see the flashy light videos, Twitter or whatnot. And it is a way to get some of the issues across, but more serious issues they can't be put across in like funny videos and whatnot, because then people will think they're making jokes out of it. So it is a good idea if you want to attract young people, but at the same time, young people need to pay attention to the more serious issues too, I think.
One student suggested that the Democrats have been doing a bit more, but Hillary Clinton seems to try too hard to get the young African-American vote, and Bernie Sanders' promise of the Free Education Act is skeptical because there is no such thing as free. Regardless of who gets the most attention from the young voter, the actual vote is the main goal.
Young people have become more involved with politics as it merges with their lifestyle, incorporating trendy and fresh ideas, and it will continue to play a key role in this presidential race. Continuing on in our team coverage of political demographics, we take a look at the evangelical vote. A candidate's religious beliefs have influenced the American political system for decades. The majority of voters take into consideration the candidate's religion when heading to the polls. Taylor Hollander looks into how religion is affecting the 2016 path to the presidency.
Religion has had an influence on American politics going back to President John F. Kennedy and his Catholic faith, and it continues to be a topic of debate in presidential elections today.
I'm a Christian, and my faith is integral to who I am.
Dr. Kirk Randazzo, a political science professor at the University of South Carolina, said religious beliefs have influenced voters for years.
So in the past, I think religion has played a key role in the elections, especially among evangelical Christians, the rise of the Christian Coalition in the 1980s, and basically the connection of their support to conservative candidates, primarily in the Republican Party.
In a January 2016 study, the Pew Research Center found that 51% of adults said they're less likely to vote for a presidential candidate that does not believe in God. Donald Trump, the Republican frontrunner, is not viewed as religious by most Americans, and after insulting nearly every group in America, he continues to win the majority of the evangelical vote.
Written by a nice reporter. Now the poor guy, you got to see this guy. Oh, I don't know what I said. I don't remember.
Trump has won 10 primary states. He won the evangelical vote in 9 of those 10 states and tied with Ted Cruz for the evangelical vote in the 10th.
I think what Donald Trump is tapping into is a level of anger and resentment among evangelicals who probably feel like their concerns haven't been taken seriously by members of the Republican Party.
The Pew Research Center found that 1/2 of Americans believe that religious conservatives have too much control over the GOP. Dr. Randazzo said this could explain why the evangelical votes are shifting to the candidates seen as the least religious. With 5 months until the Republican National Convention, evangelicals could continue to propel Trump to the Republican nomination. Taylor Hollander, Carolina News.
While the evangelical vote can be overlooked, it could be a determining factor when it comes to the path to the presidency. Just as religion plays a part in getting votes, throughout our team coverage, we've seen how race, gender, and age also affect the polls and how a candidate operates their campaign. That wraps up our demographics coverage as we took it from the South Carolina primaries to what's to come in the general election. Back to you guys.
Thanks, Malik. While out on the campaign trail, I caught up with one man from Massachusetts who's following the campaign from state to state, praying for peace among the candidates. He told me it was heartwarming to see candidates beyond their day-to-day rhetoric.
And I support all the candidates. I've been traveling the country. I've gone to at least 100 rallies, and I offer all of them a flower for peace. It's a symbolic gesture that if they become president, there'll be peace over their term.
There have been some super dedicated supporters in the rallies across South Carolina.
Yeah, it really just shows you how important this election is going to be for voters. All right, coming up next, now that the primaries have left the state, we'll show you the impact that the state continues to feel.
The economy is a vital thing for America, Kevin. And with the primaries wrapping up, I wonder how this is going to affect the South Carolina economy.
Yeah, Deonica, I took a closer look at what businesses got a boost from these early primaries. The Republican and Democratic primaries have moved on, but South Carolina is still feeling their economic effects.
It gave the hotels and restaurants a lot of extra business that we weren't expecting.
David Erbacher is the director of sales at the Hyatt Place Hotel in downtown Columbia. He said that the last 3 weeks were great for his hotel.
Typical weekday rates range from $189 to $209. Our midweek rates were $399, roughly per se.
That $190 difference for a room gave the hotel a big boost for the month of February.
I am going to hate doing budgets next year for February. Let's just put it that way. And this will definitely be a challenge to replace for years to come.
But hotels are not the only businesses that capitalize from the South Carolina primaries. Television advertising felt the impact too.
The first is in terms of the advertising dollars that we see here locally that are both spent on the part of the candidates themselves as well as the political parties.
During the primaries, a political spot between 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. cost between $625 and $800 for candidates on the CBS affiliate in Columbia, WLTX. During 1 week, 409 political ads were bought to air. Von Nessen said tourism also had an impact from the primaries.
Tourism may be the other in terms of the long-term implications, because to the extent that South Carolina gets additional promotional activity, that's going to generate long-run impacts as well as the short run.
Von Nessen says that the major cities in South Carolina are seeing the most benefits.
I would say that the benefits are going more towards the major metropolitan regions and the cities where the debates and town halls are occurring, because that's where most of the exposure is coming.
But overall, the whole state is benefiting from the primaries.
The candidates are spent a lot of time in more rural areas throughout the state, because we have to remember that they're looking to appeal to all South Carolinians. So I think most of the state benefits.
Urbacher says football games might be fun, but he would choose a primary over football any day.
Was it more impactful than a football game? My answer was yes. This is an extended period of time, so absolutely was a beneficial thing for the city of Columbia.
The next primaries will be in 2020, but until then, it's back to work in South Carolina.
The primaries are great for the state of South Carolina, and that's one of the reasons why it's held so early.
That's right. It really is crazy the impact that these primaries have on this great state. This story really opened my eyes about how much of an impact primaries have as a whole on states. Coming up, see how the power of social media has fueled the candidates' campaigns.
The 2016 presidential candidates have been active on social media, especially Twitter.
And our Christina Zagami took a look at how the candidates have been using social media to help their campaigns, and if it's been working.
Social media has erupted in recent years, and presidential candidates have taken note of its power. 2008 has been referred to as the Facebook election, and many believe President Barack Obama's use of Facebook helped him to win. The 2016 presidential candidates are following Obama's lead, but recent trends show that Twitter has taken over for this election. Candidates use Twitter to connect with voters and provide easy access to links and videos promoting their campaigns. And of course, they use it to insult one another. Social media may seem like an inexpensive way for candidates to connect with voters, but it comes with a price. A report by Borrell Associates shows that roughly $500 million has been spent on social media in the 2016 election.
$500 million on social media may seem excessive, but it might not be. Voters are engaged in social media for the 2016 election more than ever before, and this gives candidates the ability to see exactly what voters are looking for.
Dr. Amir Karami, a professor at the University of South Carolina, says social media is worth the investment.
You go to the social media, you analyze the people's behavior, and at the end, you can figure out how you can spend your money in terms of advertising and so on.
Karami and a team of students have been collecting Twitter data from each of the primary states. They have analyzed positive and negative tweets for the two Democratic candidates and the Republican candidates that were tweeted about most. The study found that two candidates are a lot stronger on social media.
Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton receive more number of the tweets than the other candidates. This means that they invest a lot in social media.
After Super Tuesday, we can see that Trump and Clinton have not only dominated the Twitterverse, but the polls as well. Trump is currently leading the Republicans. He won 10 out of the 15 states that have voted. Clinton has also won 10 states over Bernie Sanders. So is it coincidence or correlation? Karami says that Twitter isn't going to dictate who gets the White House.
We are not going to predict the election.
Although 140 characters may not be enough to get a spot in the Oval Office, this election may just be remembered as the Twitter election. Christina Zagami, Carolina News.
The best way to keep up with the candidates is to follow them on social media. If you tweeted them, who knows, they might even tweet you back. Kevin, do you follow anybody on social media?
Well, I do. I follow all of them, and it can get a little interesting sometimes, with Donald Trump and stuff. Speaking of Donald Trump, Super Tuesday was good to both Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, but the rest of their rivals didn't come out with the wins they were hoping for. Our Kristen Whitaker has the latest on the race and what's next for the candidates.
For Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton, Super Tuesday was everything they were hoping for.
What a Super Tuesday!
Both the Democratic and Republican frontrunners sped past their rivals, winning most of the state's delegates for their respective parties. 15 states have now already participated in their caucus or primary, and by the middle of March, 58% of the total delegates will have been awarded. Hillary Clinton has about half the delegates she needs to clinch the nomination on the Democratic side, with most of those being superdelegates. On the other hand, Donald Trump has about 1/4 of the total he needs to win. In the coming primary, some states will start to become winner-takes-all, which makes the challenge even more difficult for the trailing candidates to take the votes from the frontrunners. USC's Dean of the College of Information and Communications and former CNN correspondent Charles Bierbauer says it's not over for the remaining candidates.
On the Democratic side, there's not a whole lot that Senator Sanders can do unless he can win some of the states that are coming up. But it seems that increasingly the margin will only get larger for Secretary Clinton. On the Republican side, you still have Senators Cruz and Rubio and Governor Kasich in the race. Pretty much they need to stay in and take every delegate that they can so that Trump doesn't run away with the race before the convention.
So although Super Tuesday is now in the rearview mirror, the path to the presidency has become a lot narrower. With fewer speed bumps for Trump and Clinton, it's now time for the remaining candidates to shift gears if they want to win their party's nomination. Kristen Whitaker, Carolina News.
With 35 states still left to vote in primaries or caucuses, the saying, never say never, has never been more true.
Coming up next, I'll sit down with political specialist Corey Alpert to discuss the path to the presidency and what that road looks like for each candidate. Thanks, Kevin. I'm over here in the newsroom with Corey Alpert, a student at USC who's very much involved in politics here at USC. So, how are you doing today?
Doing well. How are you?
Good. So to start off, we're going to be talking about the Republican primary, which is on, of course, February 20th. So just to ask some broad questions at first, why do you think Trump is doing so well?
Well, firstly, I think Trump is tapping into a very populist stream that really has a cross-party appeal. And I think we're seeing a lot of the same appeal with people like Bernie Sanders, and a lot of the exit polls are proving this, that Sanders and Trump are really appealing to voters who are looking for someone who speaks against sort of what they're calling politically correct, who they're speaking for them, they're speaking the truth, they're speaking out against the establishment. It's a very anti-establishment vein that he's tapping into, and I think he's tapping into a lot of enthusiasm and unfortunately a lot of fear and anger, but it's earning him a lot of votes.
Do you see, with their poor turnout in South Carolina, do you see John Kasich dropping out anytime soon?
I think John Kasich is actually proving that he does have a small niche. I think he's showing that he can at least pull some votes, and I think he's establishing himself as a potential vice presidential nominee.
What do you think, speaking of Republicans, what do you think of the negative ads that are going on right now? Do you think they're working towards candidates' advantage?
I think it's having the same effect as what happened in 2012. You're seeing candidates sort of bloody each other, and you're eventually going to get to a point where no candidate is going to come out of this looking positive. Like I said before, the normal rules don't seem to be applying in that primary. Attacks don't seem to be landing. So they might actually be working for the candidate they're supposed to be attacking. I think Ted Cruz is doing a very good job of building those ads. Now he has a very interesting strategy because normally campaigns have one firm that do most of their ads. He has 3 that bid. So they actually have, I think, some really interesting and clever ads because they're all having to bid to get airtime.
Did you see your predictions play out in the Democratic primary for South Carolina?
Yes. Secretary Clinton has a large stronghold in the African American community, which in South Carolina is anywhere between 50 to about 62% of the Democratic vote in South Carolina. And she, for the last 20, 30 years, has had very strong connections to that community. I think what sealed it was Congressman Clyburn coming out and endorsing Secretary Clinton. But South Carolina was her firewall. Internal polls were showing that she was going to win by about 20 to 25, not 48 points. But that being said, the African American community and minority communities in South Carolina, which make up a massive majority of the Democratic vote in South Carolina, they came out to support Secretary Clinton.
So let's switch gears a little bit to Super Tuesday. What do you think the polls show?
So this Super Tuesday really showed that there are 2 frontrunners in the race. You have Donald Trump on the Republican side and Hillary Clinton on the other. And both won 7 states. There were 4 states that were sort of left to the others. And I think we're showing that there are clear frontrunners, there's clear momentum, but it's also showing, and if you're looking at the exit polling data, it's also showing that there are clear divides in both parties. And it's something that both parties are going to have to address moving forward, especially coming into the general, but even beyond the general election. So, but I think electorally, Super Tuesday really showed a lot of momentum. Secretary Clinton is up by over 500 delegates. She is almost halfway to the mark where she needs to reach. And she very reasonably could become the Democratic nominee by March 15th. Donald Trump, on the other hand, he's a little bit slowed because of the proportionality rules and the way that the Republican side works, but he's showing a lot of momentum. He's showing that he can win broad coalitions of voters, and he's showing that he can turn, like I was saying with Senator Sanders, he's showing that he can turn that enthusiasm into votes, and that's a big strength for him right now.
Well, thank you for being here, Corey Alpert, our political specialist here on campus. Back to you guys in the greenhouse studio.
Thanks, Alexa.
Well, looking forward, it'll be interesting to see how candidates do in their home states, like Marco Rubio in Florida and John Kasich in Ohio.
Yeah, will they get enough support to reach the front runners Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump?
I guess only time will tell. Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks so much for joining us for this special edition of Carolina News.
And see you on Monday, March 14th. Have a great weekend.